Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Review. We are so happy you are here today. My name is Bonnie Brzozowski. I'm a public services librarian here at the Corvallis-Benton County Public Library, also the co-coordinator for Random Review, along with fellow librarian Mike Hansen, who you see every other month. Today, we will hear a review by local acclaimed author Kate Hope Day of the book Cloud Cuckoo Land, authored by Anthony Doerr. Before I introduce Kate, I just want to remind you of our upcoming random review on January 11th, which will be by Russell Yamada. He will review Facing the Mountain, a true story of Japanese American heroes in World War II by Daniel James Brown. This event will be held virtually. Please register at the link that I'm going to share in the chat. This is actually just our link to the Random Review website. It has spots to register for upcoming random reviews, as well as a spot where you can see previous random reviews, including November's random review of Remember, the Science of Memory and Art of Forgetting, which was reviewed by Helen Cow of Lumina Hospice, and it is a great review, so I hope you'll check it out. A reminder that the Random Review series is co-sponsored by the Friends of the Corvallis-Benton County Public Library. That's an all-volunteer organization which is committed to supporting the library. We're so grateful to the Friends for their tremendous support. You can learn more about the Friends, you can become a member and find out more about becoming a Friends volunteer at the link that I'm going to share in the chat as well. So here it comes. There we go. And I want to take just a quick second to orient you to the platform that we're using today. So to submit questions throughout the presentation that are going to be answered at the end of the presentation, just please click on Q&A. It's usually in the top left corner of your window, but it might be somewhere else. Just a note that we will send a video recording of today's review via email to everyone who registered within approximately 24 to 48 hours of the event. Once the recording is subtitled by our staff, it will also be posted to our YouTube channel. And that is a link that I'm also going to share in the chat because you will find many of our virtual events there and a lot of great content that you might not know we have. Okay, now let me take a minute to tell you a little bit more about Kate Hope Day, our reviewer today. Kate holds a BA from Bryn Mawr College, as well as a PhD in English from the University of Pittsburgh. She was an associate producer at HBO. Her first novel, If Then, was an indie-bound Indie Next pick and is being adapted for television by Heyday and Apple TV. Her second novel, In the Quick, was a Good Morning America book club buzz pick. Kate lives here in Oregon with her husband and 2 children. Kate, would you please join us on screen?
Hello. I'm so glad to be here. Welcome, everyone. I can't think of a better opportunity to talk about this big, sprawling novel about libraries than with all of you, an audience of library patrons who no doubt value the library as much as I do. Before we start talking about Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr, I wanted to start the review by thinking about 2 questions that have sort of preoccupied me for a long time. First, as a scholar of English literature when I was working on my PhD in English, and then when I was teaching primarily the British novel, but also all time periods and of the novel, and now as an author of novels myself. So the first question is, what does a novel do while we're reading it? And then the second question is, what should a novel do once we're finished reading it? And with the first question, I'm really interested in the experience of reading a novel. What sorts of things happen inside the reader when we open up a novel and turn to chapter 1, page 1, and start reading? What's wonderful about this question is that everyone in the audience is who has read a novel, any novel, not just this one, And I imagine that has got to be every single person tuning in right now. You have just as much experience and expertise as I do to answer that question. And today, as we talk about the big complex novel Cloud Cuckoo Land, a book that literally takes up a lot of space, definitely a book that we could call a doorstop book. Um, I want to think about a specific way of answering this question: what does a novel do? And consider the kinds of spaces that a novel creates in the mind of the reader. And then my watch thought I was talking to it. Hopefully that won't happen again. Okay, so what kinds of spaces the novel creates in the mind of the reader? And what do I mean by that? So I'm just going to draw from my own bookshelf here to provide a couple of examples of the way we can begin to think about the novel creating certain kinds of spaces in the mind of the reader. I have to go to Middlemarch first. First published in 1871, actually in serial format, which was typical of the time period. Middlemarch is a novel narrated by an omniscient narrator who kind of roves around the town of Middlemarch, and we will sort of stop in one house and hear what's going on with Dorothea, and then we'll kind of travel down the road and stop into another house and hear what's going on with Lydgate. And with one exception of Dorothea's trip to Rome for her honeymoon, almost the entire novel takes place within the confines of the town. And so as you're reading, I have always thought about it as kind of creating the town of Middlemarch in your mind. Another very different in some ways example that occurred to me was I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith, which was published in 1948 as a single volume, which was typical for that time period. And the ways that that book follows, it's a first person narration, first of all. And so we're in the mind of Cassandra, and we go through many seasons as she is growing into young adulthood. And we follow the dramas of her life, her family's life, her sister Rose's life, all within almost exclusively within the walls of this very distinctive place, which is the castle that she lives in. And then we see the seasons change several times, and in that way we become quite accustomed and almost familiar in a homey sort of way to this castle, and we sort of inhabit it for the whole of the book in this interesting way. And the castle becomes in that way just as much of a character as Cassandra and Rose do. The other example that occurred to me is the novel Jazz by Toni Morrison, which was published in 1992. That book always feels to me as if I'm reading, when I'm reading it, as if I am existing within a New York City apartment building. And the narrator, also a roving third person narrator, will kind of visit one apartment, and we'll learn about Dorcas, and visit another apartment and we'll learn about Joe or Violet. And, they kind of, their stories overlap with each other in the same way that maybe you're living in an apartment, you can hear the music from your next door neighbor, or you see, the laundry of your other across the courtyard neighbor out the window. It has that sort of feeling to it as you're reading. And as you go and as you get closer to the end, that community within that building, although technically it is multiple buildings, but as I was reading, I really felt like I was in one building. you get to know these people, and it becomes very home-like in a way that's similar to I Capture the Castle. And then the other example I thought of, which is quite different, is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, which was published in 2005, which is a book everyone should read. Um, and it's a first person narration, similar to I Capture the Castle. But as we begin the book, we're told that we're going, we're told our narrator is Kathy H, and she's in the middle of driving a car, and we don't really understand where she's going. And as she starts to tell her story of her past, and as her story unfolds, she's still driving, and the book feels very much, I think, for me as my readerly experience, as if you got into a car with a person that you don't know at all, and you took a long road trip with them, and they told the story of their lives. And in the beginning they seem like not easy to know and mysterious, and that's how Kathy H feels at the start of Never Let Me Go. But as the car ride goes further and as the story unfolds, you get to know them more and more. And that's quite a different space, isn't it? The interior of a car, which is traveling, which is static inside, but traveling and moving forward geographically as the story unfolds. So, what sort of space does Cloud Cuckoo Land create? I would really love to hold that question in our minds as we delve into the book itself. And for those of you who have already read the novel, feel free to jump in with your thoughts in the little question box to the top left of your screen. And I'd love to get to some of your thoughts at the end. First, so we're just going to hold this question in our minds because we're going to return to it. First, I'm just going to say a little bit about Anthony Doerr. He's the author of Cloud Cuckoo Land, which was a finalist for the National Book Award, and All the Light We Cannot See, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, and a #1 New York Times bestseller. He's also the author of the story collections Memory Wall and The Shell Collector, the novel about Grace, and the memoir 4 Seasons in Rome. He lives in Boise, Idaho with his wife and 2 sons. Now, before I read from the book, and I am going to read 3 chapters from the book, I'm going to take on the, I have to say, not so easy task of summarizing Cloud Cuckoo Land for you so we can kind of get our bearings. And here I'm going to get some help from James Wood's review of the novel in The New Yorker. And I'm going to quote from the review, briefly quote from the review here. So this is his summary of the book. In the nearish future, Constance, a teenage girl, is flying in a spaceship with 85 other people toward a planet that may sustain human life after its collapse on Earth. Reaching its destination will take almost 600 years. In mid-15th century Constantinople, Anna, a Greek Christian, awaits the assault that has long been threatened by Muslim forces. A few hundred miles away, Omir, a gentle country boy, finds himself caught up in the Sultan's army and its march toward Constantinople, and he eventually encounters Anna. So Anna and Omir share the same time period. In contemporary Lakeport, Idaho, contemporary to us, set in 2020, a sweet-natured octogenarian named Zeno Ninnis is minding a group of school children who are rehearsing a play in the local library. There are a lot of libraries in this book. While outside the building, a troubled eco-terrorist named Seymour sits in his car, a bomb in his lap, about to make his great explosive statement. So Zeno and Seymour share the same time period. These characters, and I'm still quoting from that review, These characters are explicitly connected by a fable or fragments of a fable that Doerr has invented and that he attributes to an actual Greek writer, Antonius Diogenes, titled Cloud Cuckoo Land. The fable tells the tale of Aethon, a shepherd who tries to travel to a utopian city in the sky, a place in the clouds where all needs are met and no one suffers. And after assorted escapades of a classical nature, the hero is turned into a donkey and a crow, in the spirit of this book, which is a real book from that time period. The hero is turned into a donkey and a crow. Aethon returns to Earth, grateful for the green beauty of the world, or as Doerr capitalizes for the slow-witted, what you already have is better than what you so desperately seek. So Aethon tries to get to utopia, gets there, lives it up for a little bit, and then decides he actually wants to go back home. And what he had was better than what he had hoped for. So each of the novel's 5 principal characters finds his or her way to this invented Greek text. Anna stumbles across a frail goatskin codex of the tale in a ruined library in Constantinople, and that's probably one of my favorite scenes of the novel, is when she finds that codex. Omir and Anna eventually fall in love and have children, and together they guard and tend this magical manuscript. Zeno spends his later years translating the Greek fable. Indeed, it's his dramatic version of Cloud Cuckoo Land that the school children are rehearsing in the Idaho library. Constance's father, Constance is the one in the future time who is on a spaceship. Constance's father, one of a small number of people on the spaceship old enough to remember life on Earth, most people on the spaceship have been born on board, used to tell embellished adaptations of the Greek story to his daughter at bedtime. Near the end of the novel, Diogenes' fragments reach even Seymour, now in the Idaho State Correctional Institution, where he's doing time for the deadly incidents at the library. Seymour gets interested in Zeno's translation and asks one of his victims, the town's former librarian, to send it to him. Okay, so there are 6 main narrative threads, each with their own arc. The invented fable Cloud Cuckoo Land by Antonius Diogenes, that's told in fragments that are kind of inserted throughout the book. Then the future time story, which follows Constance in the spaceship. The present time story, which follows Zeno and Seymour, and kind of centers on the Lakeport Library. And the past time story, which centers around Constantinople and the surrounding areas, and that follows Anna and Omir. So I'm going to read a bit from Constance, Zeno, and Seymour, since those are the chapters that open the book. And again, Constance's point of view is the future time story. And I'm going to read from the prologue. And I will say this, if you feel a little disoriented as I'm reading, I had the same reaction when I started this book, and I do believe that it is purposeful. So bear with me. When I get to Zeno and Seymour, you will feel a bit more grounded, I believe. So the prologue begins with these words. The Argos, mission year 65, day 307 inside Vault 1. Constance. A 14-year-old girl sits cross-legged on the floor of a circular vault. A mass of curls halos her head. Her socks are full of holes. This is Constance. Behind her, inside a translucent cylinder that rises 16 feet from floor to ceiling, hangs a machine composed of trillions of golden threads, none thicker than a human hair. Each filament twines around thousands of others in entanglements of astonishing intricacy. Occasionally, a bundle somewhere along the surface of the machine pulses with light. Now here, now there. This is Sybil. Okay, so Sybil is a machine, computer. Elsewhere in the room, there is an inflatable cot, a recycling toilet, a food printer, 11 sacks of Nourish powder, and a multi-directional treadmill the size and shape of an automobile tire called a perambulator. Light comes from a ring of diodes in the ceiling. There is no visible exit. Arranged in a grid on the floor lie almost 100 rectangular scraps. Constance has torn from empty Nourish powder sacks and written on with homemade ink. Some are dense with her handwriting. Others accommodate a single word. One, for example, contains 24 letters of the ancient Greek alphabet. Another reads, in the millennium leading up to 1453, the city of Constantinople was besieged 23 times, but no army ever breached its land walls. She leans forward and lifts 3 scraps from the puzzle in front of her. The machine behind her flickers. It's late, Constance, and you have not eaten all day. This is the computer talking. Sybil. I'm not hungry, Constance says. How about some nice risotto or roast lamb with mashed potatoes? There are still many combinations you have not tried. No, thank you, Sybil. She looks down at the first scraps and reads. The lost Greek prose tale, Cloud Cuckoo Land, by the writer Antonius Diogenes, relating a shepherd's journey to a utopian city in the sky, was probably written around the end of the 1st century CE. The second scrap. We know from a 9th century Byzantine summary of the book that opened with a short prologue in which Diogenes addressed an ailing niece and declared that he had not invented the comical story which followed, but instead discovered it in a tomb of the ancient city of Tyre. The third scrap. The tomb, Diogenes wrote to his niece, was marked Athon, lived 80 years a man, 1 year a donkey, 1 year a sea bass, 1 year a crow. Inside, Diogenes claimed to have discovered a wooden chest bearing the inscription, stranger, whoever you are, open this to learn what will amaze you. When he opened the chest, he found 24 cypress wood tablets upon which were written Athon's story. Constance shuts her eyes, sees the writer descend into the dark of the tombs, sees him study the strange chest in the torchlight. The diodes in the ceiling dim and the walls soften from white to amber, and Sybil says, it will be no light soon, Constance. She picks her way through the scraps on the floor and retrieves what's left of an empty sack from beneath her cot. Using her teeth and fingers, she tears a blank rectangle. She places a little scoop of Nourish powder into the food printer, pushes buttons, and the device spits out an ounce of dark liquid into its bowl. Then she takes a length of polyethylene tubing, the tip of which she has carved into a nib, dips her makeshift pen into the makeshift ink, leans over the blank scrap, and draws a cloud. She dips again. Atop the cloud, she draws the tower of a city, then little dots of birds soaring around the turrets. The room darkens further. Sybil flickers. Constance, I must insist that you eat. That's Sybil talking. I'm not hungry, thank you, Sybil. She picks up a rectangle inscribed with a date, February 20th, 2020, and sets it beside another that reads Folio A. Then she places her drawing of a cloud city on the left. For a breath in the dying light, the 3 scraps seem almost to rise up and glow. Constance sits back on her heels. She has not left this room for almost a year. Okay, so that was the prologue of the book. And now I'm going to read to you from the um, first chapter, which is titled The Lakeport Public Library, February 20th, 2020, 4:30 p.m. Zeno. He escorts 5 fifth graders from the elementary school to the public library through curtains of falling snow. He is an octogenarian in a canvas coat. His boots are fastened with Velcro. Cartoon penguins skate across his necktie. All day, joy has steadily inflated inside his chest. And now this afternoon at 4:30 p.m. on a Thursday in February, watching the children run ahead down the sidewalk, Alex Hess wearing his papier-mâché donkey head, Rachel Wilson carrying a plastic torch, Natalie Hernandez lugging a portable speaker, the feeling threatens to capsize him. They pass the police station, the Parks Department, Eden's Gate Realty. The Lakeport Public Library is a high gabled 2-story gingerbread Victorian on the corner of Lake and Park that was donated to the town after the First World War. Its chimney leans, its gutters sag. Packing tape holds together cracks on 3 of the 4 front-facing windows. Several inches of snow have already settled on the junipers flanking the walk and atop the book drop box on the corner, which has been painted to look like an owl. The kids charge up the front walk, bound onto the porch, and high-five Sharif, the children's librarian, who has stepped outside to help Zeno navigate the stairs. Sharif has lime green earbuds in his ears and cracked glitter twinkles on the hair on his arms. His t-shirt says, "I like big books and I cannot lie." Inside, Zeno wipes fog from his eyeglasses. Construction paper hearts are taped to the front of the welcome desk. A framed needlepoint on the wall. Behind it reads, "Questions answered here." On the computer table on all 3 monitors, screen saver spirals twist in synchrony. Between the audiobook shelf and 2 shabby armchairs, a radiator leak seeps through the ceiling tiles and drips into a 7-gallon trash can. Flip, flop, flip. The kids scatter snow everywhere as they stampede upstairs, heading for the children's section, and Zeno and Sharif share a smile as they listen to their footfalls reach the top of the staircase and stop. "Whoa," says the voice of Olivia Ott. "Holy Magoli," says the voice of Christopher D. Sharif takes Zeno's elbow as they ascend. The entrance to the second story has been blocked with a plywood wall, spray painted gold. And in its center, over a small arched door, Zeno has written, and in the book, this is a Greek phrase, which will be translated in a moment. The 5th graders cluster against the plywood and snow melts on their jackets and backpacks, and everyone looks at Zeno, and Zeno waits for his breath to catch up with the rest of him. "Does everyone remember what it says?" "Of course," says Rachel. "Duh," says Christopher. On her tiptoes, Natalie runs a finger beneath each word. "Stranger, whoever you are, open this to learn what will amaze you." "Oh my flipping gosh," said Alex, his donkey head under his arm. "It's like we're about to walk into the book." Sharif switches off the stairwell light and the children crowd around the little door in the red glow of the exit sign. "Ready?" calls Zeno. From the other side of the plywood, Marion, the library director, calls, "Ready." One by one, the 5th graders pass through the little arched doorway into the children's section. The shelves, tables, and bean bags that normally fill the space have been pushed against the walls, and in their places 30 folding chairs. Above the chairs, dozens of cardboard clouds coated with glitter hang from the rafters by threads. In front of the chairs is a small stage, and behind the stage, on a canvas sheet hung across the entire rear wall, Marianne has painted a city in the clouds. Golden towers cut by hundreds of little windows and crowned by pennants rise in clusters. Around their spires whirl dense flights of birds, little brown buntings and big silver eagles, birds with long curving tails, and others with long curving bills, birds of the world and birds of the imagination. Marianne has shut off the overhead lights and the beam of a single karaoke light. On a stand, the clouds sparkle and the flocks shimmer and the towers seem illuminated from within. It's, says Olivia. Better than I, says Christopher. Cloud Cuckoo Land, whispers Rachel. Natalie sets down her speaker and Alex leaps on stage and Marion calls, careful, some of the paint may still be wet. Zeno lowers himself into a chair in the front row. Every time he blinks, a memory ripples across the undersides of his eyelids. His father pratfalls into a snowbank. A librarian slides open the drawer of a card catalog. A man in a prison camp scratches Greek characters into the dust. Sharif shows the kids the backstage area that he has created behind 3 bookshelves, packed with props and costumes, and Olivia pulls a latex cap over her hair to make herself look bald, and Christopher drags a microwave box painted to look like a marble sarcophagus to the center of the stage, and Alex reaches to touch a tower of the painted city, and Natalie slides a laptop from her backpack. Marion's phone buzzes. Pizzas are ready, she says into Zeno's good ear. I'll walk over and pick them up. Be back in a jiff. Mr. Nennis? Rachel is tapping Zeno's shoulder. Her red hair is pulled back in braided pigtails, and snow has melted to droplets on her shoulders, and her eyes are wide and bright. You built all this for us? And I'm going to read one more chapter, which is from Seymour's perspective. One block away inside a Pontiac Grand Am mantled in 3 inches of snow, a gray-eyed 17-year-old named Seymour Stolman drowses with a backpack on his lap. The backpack is an oversized dark green JanSport and contains 2 Presto pressure cookers, each of which is packed with roofing nails, ball bearings, an igniter, and 19 ounces of high explosive called Composition B. Twin wires run from the body of each cooker to the lid where they plug into the circuit board of a cellular phone. In a dream, Seymour walks beneath trees toward a cluster of white tents, but every time he takes a step forward, the trail twists and the tents recede, and a terrible confusion presses down on him. He wakes with a start. The dashboard clock says 4:42 p.m. How long did he sleep? 15 minutes, 20 at most. Stupid, careless. He has been in the car for more than 4 hours and his toes are numb and he has to pee. With a sleeve, he clears vapor from the inside of the windshield. He risks the wipers once and they brush a slab of snow off the glass. No cars parked in front of the library. No one on the sidewalk. The only car in the gravel parking lot to the west is Marion the librarian's Subaru, humped with snow. 4:43 p.m. 6 inches before dark, says the radio. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Recall things you know. Owls have 3 eyelids. Their eyeballs are not spheres, but elongated tubes. A group of owls is called a parliament. All he needs to do is stroll in, hide the backpack in the southeast corner of the library as close as possible to the Eden's Gate Realty office, and stroll out. Drive north, wait until the library closes at 6 p.m., dial the numbers, wait 5 rings. Boom. Stop seeing more there. Okay. So as you can tell, the structure of the novel, and that was just 3 of the 6 narrative threads, the structure of the novel is multifaceted And to give a sense of how intricate the interweaving timelines are, Anthony Doerr has provided on his webpage a map of his plot lines, which I think is fantastic. And if you go to his webpage, you can actually see a beautiful illustrated version of this an artist has done, which I was not able to pull that image. But it's a bit hard to read, but you can see there's the six points of view here: Constance, Anna, Zeno, Aethon, Seymour, Omer. When I was preparing for this talk, I was looking at this fantastic map. It occurred to me that we could have a little sidebar on point of view in the history of the novel, as that plot chart and it asks for this little sidebar. A lot of people think of multiple narration as a modern invention, where you go from one point of view to another, and but really it was there from the beginning. Most scholars consider Pamela by Samuel Richardson to be the first novel in English, and the idea, it's an epistolary novel, so the idea of multiple points of view was there from the beginning, although not entirely recognizable as the way we are familiar with multiple narration. And in fact, the more singular form of narration with a third person narrator or a first person narrator was really not made popular until Jane Austen was writing. And what's interesting is I have to take an opportunity to talk about Bleak House just really quick. The way that we tend to read thrillers and mystery novels, of which there are so many now, is really something that was developed first in Bleak House. So we had multiple narration before Bleak House, but Bleak House was the first novel that used it's a two narrators in Bleak House, and it used the two narrators to sort of withhold some information from the reader and provide some information to the reader, and using the two narrators develop a kind of mystery plot line. Bleak House is considered the first detective novel, although it wouldn't be quite recognizable for readers today. But this idea that we are all familiar with, and that Anthony Doerr uses to great effect in this book, that you can use more than one narrator to leave the reader in suspense when it comes to certain key pieces of information. And then I just thought it was interesting. I think, this book owes a debt to obviously the beginning of the novel with Samuel Richardson, and when multiple points of view became sort of commonplace and a way of creating a mystery plot with Bleak House. But the idea that you could have so many narrators was something that many people think kind of Jennifer Egan kind of broke through and said, oh, actually, you can have more than 2, 3, 4 narrators, because in A Visit from the Goon Squash, she has, I believe, 13. Yeah, 13 interrelated characters. So 13 points of view. Now, this book only has 6, but definitely I think there's a kind of interesting timeline there from Richardson through Dickens, and then Jennifer Egan adding more and more complexity in the way that a novel can be narrated. But let's go back to our question about what sorts of spaces the novel creates in our minds. If we were going to try to describe the space Cloud Cuckoo Land creates in our minds as readers, we would struggle to describe it merely in terms of time or place, right? What sort of space provides access to ancient texts and modern ones side by side? What sort of space brings disparate time separated by hundreds and hundreds of years together, or places separated by vast geographical distances together? For those of you who have read the novel, you know where I'm going with this, because it becomes very quickly clear as you're reading Cloud Cuckoo Land that the space it creates in your mind as you're reading is more akin to a library than anything else. And we are, of course, primed for this by the book's dedication for the librarians then, now, and in the years to come. So I want to turn to our second question. What should a novel do? And here I'm interested in the idea that novels can act upon the reader after we've reached the last page and closed the book. And think about how novels can change the way we see the world, how they can alter our relationship with ourselves or with other people, how they can urge us to act. And you'll forgive me, former Victorianist here. I'll just go to George Eliot and Charles Dickens really quickly. The Victorians were very clear about intention. They thought the novel was a useful tool for very specific things, and they set out to set out to do things with their novels, and they're very explicit about that. George Eliot thought that the novel had a very peculiar capacity to cultivate and enlarge our sympathetic feeling. And by sympathy, she had a very specific definition of that. And she thought that the novel could bring you into close sympathetic contact with people you wouldn't normally meet in your everyday life, and therefore would broaden and strengthen your ability to sympathize with people who are different from yourself. Charles Dickens thought something fairly similar, but he talked a lot about how the novel has this capacity to represent reality to the reader, in a way that once you close the book, you have this kind of heightened capacity to notice things in your everyday life that you hadn't noticed before because of the work the novel did. And in noticing these sort of seemingly insignificant details of your life, or seemingly insignificant people that you meet in your life, that you have this more attuned ability to attend to all the complex details of life. And therefore, he thought that if you could see the specificity of people, you would automatically, as a human, feel for them. And so it was all about, can you find a way to have a reader connect with the specificity of real life, and that will work upon them even after the book is closed. Cloud Cuckoo Land is pretty overt in its intentions, more so than maybe any other contemporary novel that I have read. It's at the center of each of the narrative threads, a message about the importance of preserving the written word and the history of literature, including texts written in ancient and dead languages, and the vital role that librarians and libraries play in the stewardship of these texts. And here I'm just going to quote from Doerr himself in an interview with his Danish publisher, which you can find on YouTube in its entirety. He says, "I think the best stories are the ones that get retold enough so that the next generation can see something new in each." It's about stewardship. What does it mean to care for stories? I'm in love with the idea that stories can provide some continuity through time. If we forget our histories, we repeat them. It's so important to remember. And this is where, just put that fabulous plot chart up again. This is where the many-threaded form of the novel connects with this question of intention or message, because despite the seeming complexity of the novel, and you'd feel that when you're looking at this plot chart, the novel really has a deeply repetitive quality to it, with each storyline following a similar arc thematically. And the conclusion of each of these arcs takes us to the same place every time: the book and the importance of books and storytelling, and the importance of the library as a steward of those books and stories. To the point that for me as a reader, about halfway through Cloud Cuckoo Land, I decided to stop reading it as a novel and started reading it more enjoyably, I would say, as a whole, as a fable, the book as a whole, not so different from the invented Greek fable at the center of the book. I would say, despite the kind of twin anxieties that shape the novel, that is, the book is doomed just as the earth is doomed. This fable, the novel as fable, goes out of its way to be life affirming and human affirming. And here I'm just going to read a little bit of the New Yorker review again. As Seymour reads the invented fable, Cloud Cuckoo Land, the potent text emits its healing gas. By age 17, he'd convinced himself that every human he saw was a parasite, captive to the dictates of consumption, we're told. But as he reconstructs Zeno's translation, he realizes that the truth is infinitely more complicated, that we are all beautiful as we are all part of the problem, and that to be a part of the problem is to be human. And just a little side note, I thought it was interesting on Anthony Doerr's website, he has a list of organizations that are supported by his portion of his royalties, and they're organizations that concentrate on stewardship of literary, library, and they support literary, library, and environmental stewardship. And I highly recommend taking a look at those. So clearly for Anthony Doerr, what he hopes his novel will do is make stewards of us, the readers, of the book and of the earth. And that is most of what I wanted to say. I do have further reading, but we're right at about 10 minutes for questions. So if there are questions, I'll just leave the further reading up, and we can either talk about it or not.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. That was really interesting. So I don't have any questions so far. So I want to remind you all that you do have that Q&A button. Feel free to submit your comments, your questions. If you just want to say hi or comment on anything, we welcome that as well. Oh, hey, here we go. This is a comment. Themes I noticed in this book. To strive for utopia might not be a goal. Life has surprises, ups and downs, and should be treasured as it is. Every main character rebels against authority. Any thoughts?
True. Yeah, that's true. Yes, and I would say each of the characters also, while they revel in some of the utopian ideas or feelings that they can find in literature, they both have they all come to some like affirming relationship with like their real lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great
Comment. Thank you.
Yeah. That's all we've got so far. Feel free to keep them coming, everybody. Do you want to talk a little more about the further reading, Kate?
Yeah, I can. Oh, just for fun, I added at the end, since we looked at Doerr's plot chart, here's one of mine from my book I'm working on right now. I just thought you guys might get a kick out of that.
Wow.
I can come back to that in a minute. I love
That's
stuff like this,
fascinating.
so I was so thrilled when I saw that he had shared that, because I love like seeing how people work visually. Um, yeah, so when I was thinking about further reading, and I will say Anthony Doerr has a very extensive uh, further reading section on his webpage, and he talks at length about the books that helped him specifically get very familiar with some of the ancient texts that he was kind of playing off of, and the books that helped him, imagine 15th century Constantinople and things like that. And so that would be a great place to go. But the books that occurred to me as I was reading, that I sort of just jotted down as I went. Foundation by Asimov is a book I haven't read in a long time. However, there just was a television adaptation, which we watched and we enjoyed. But at the center of that book, Cloud Cuckoo Land very clearly plays with a similar idea, this idea that humanity might, the earth might not last forever, but could we somehow um, get all the knowledge of all history and protect it in some way? And that idea is at the center of Foundation. So if that part of Cloud Cuckoo Land really spoke to you, you might want to go back to sort of like, maybe not the original, but one of the original stories that's thinking about that idea, and just the sort of that impulse of like a library of all things. If that's an interesting idea for you. And then wildly different, but I will say one of my favorite books about, I sort of made a list in my mind of books about libraries. And of course, Middlemarch has fantastic scenes in libraries, which are really kind of sad and depressing. And actually, in fact, Middlemarch also has at the center of it this impulse to try to understand all things, because Dorothea's husband, he's trying to create the key to all mythologies. So if any of you remember reading Middlemarch, that's there too. But Fingersmith by Sarah Waters has a library at the center of it, and it's a big book. It's a fantastic book. I love. It also has dual narration used to great effect, with a beautifully done twist. But actually, the library in that book is a library of pornographic materials from the Victorian, because the book is set in Victorian period, so it's like smutty books, a library full of smutty books, and it's just really different. And then a book that came out this year, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which I'm sure some of you have read. Bonnie, have you read it? It's
No, I haven't. I
it's
want to.
really good.
It's on my list.
It's about 3 video game designers, which I actually didn't know that when I started the book. And if I had known that, I probably might have been like, I don't know if this is for me. But it's a big book. Like Cloud, maybe not quite as long as Cloud Cuckoo Land, but quite long. And I thought of it really only because it has scenes where the characters are existing in a virtual reality, and part of the drama of the book is going on in the virtual reality in it. And that's something that Anthony Doerr does as well with Constance. She goes into the virtual library when she's on the spaceship. And if you like the idea of human beings acting out very human dramas, but in virtual spaces, that might be an interesting book. And then another book, Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour library book. Does it say? My thing is is blocking my view of my PowerPoint. Is it bookstore?
It is
Mr.
bookstore. Mhm.
Yeah, Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore. It has at its center this idea of trying to have a library of all things. So if that, again, if that's an interesting idea to you, but it centers on a kind of, can we scan every book? Could we have access to every single book that has ever existed? That's a book that's dealing with that idea. And then another book that occurred to me, which has nothing to do with libraries, but it came out the same year or very close, to Cloud Cuckoo Land. And it is similarly hefty book, Appleseed by Matt Bell. And what made me think of it is that it has these wildly separated time periods, the way Cloud Cuckoo Land does. It follows the sort of mythical figure of Johnny Appleseed, so like early America, and then various future times, but then the end of the book is in like the farthest you could imagine in the future, sort of, I guess, the end of the world, really, but we still have someone, not a human, but someone is narrating what's happened if the world is no longer here in the way that we would understand it to be here. So if you like the vast, quality of Cloud Cuckoo Land, where it's jumping across like these huge gaps in time and geography, Appleseed is a book you might enjoy.
Awesome. I love that. As a librarian, like we call them like read-alikes. Like
Yes.
if you, yeah. And I
Yeah,
love
exactly.
read-alikes. And I love, like, anytime I just love a book, it is really exciting to like try to find the books that have that similar, the
Yeah,
vibe that you enjoyed most from
I
that
know. And
book. Yeah.
sometimes like just content doesn't do it for you. It's like, I want
Yeah.
the feeling of, like I would love more books that have the feeling of I Capture the Castle, because I love that. It's like the warm bath of a novel. It's like the most comforting and just settling and soothing book you can imagine, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's sort of like, I don't need a book that's necessarily about people who live in a castle. I want like the feeling, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's so like as librarians, one of the cool things we get to do a lot is like take like readers advisory trainings, and they train you how to like try to feel out what it is the reader, what appealed to the most about that
Oh,
book.
that's so
And then
interesting.
yeah, and then trying to like use that, you kind of match it to an appeal factor and then try to map it to these other books that way.
Well, I
And
was
so
just going to
it's
say
interesting.
librarians are so good at that. And I don't know, I was going to say, I don't really know how they're good at it, but I guess you actually are having some training that way. That's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's one of the most fun aspects of my job. So, and then the library has a tool, actually I can plug it really quick, called Novelist, that anyone can use. And from home, it is accessible through our library's catalog to under series and recommendations, but it's largely just library staff recommending books and authors based on what you might have liked in the past. So like a book that
Wonderful.
that I'm always looking for read-alikes for is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I just love the feel and the atmosphere of that book. And so I'm constantly searching
Yes.
for
I just
read-alikes for
heard
it.
of a book that was supposed to be that, but no, I'll think of it. I'll email you.
Sure. And we did, it is 101, but we did get one question. So I want to throw it out, and maybe we can just wrap ourselves up that way.
Yeah.
And I don't recall if you said you'd read All the Light We Cannot See, but the person's asking, what parallels do you see between Cloud Cuckoo Land and All the Light We Cannot See?
Well, it's been a
Jenny.
very long time since I read that novel, so I am by no means an expert in it. But I think the ability to bring characters who seem wildly separated, whether that's like through time or geography or all the light we cannot see, and to bring them in connection to each other in a way that is like both that feels both surprising and inevitable, which is something that novels do, great novels do, when you get to the end and you're so surprised, and yet you're like, but yes, that's so fitting, and I would say Cloud Cuckoo Land does that in a much bigger, more complex way, whereas All the Light We Cannot See is just really just the two characters who are brought into connection with each other in these interesting ways. So the plot, I mean, the plot chart for All the Light We Cannot See would look quite different, wouldn't it? I would think, I haven't seen one, but just thinking how I would do it. So yeah, it's almost as if you're comparing like two threads versus like a tapestry, which is something that he has characters in this book that are weaving. Anna is a weaver, and they're making these very intricate tapestries in Constantinople, and this would be a much more complex tapestry, we would say, than All the Light We Cannot See.
Yeah, great. Well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for taking on this book. It was a really big book to try to review. So
Yes.
you had a big job for sure. So.
Yes, but I think like a big book like this kind of, at least to me, it kind of asked, it kind of, almost was whispering, oh, let's talk about the novel in general. Because, it's such a big novel. It's almost like it wants you to see it and it's so much about books. It's a book within a book within a book. And it's so much about, libraries. It just seemed fitting to think about like the novel as, the history of the novel and the novel in general and what the novel does for us in general. So in that way, it's sort of, I feel like it really invites some of that like companion reader that we were just talking about, readership. It's because it's so referential. It kind of draws you in and, makes you want to think about this book in relationship to everything on my bookshelf and everything in the library. And
yeah. Great. All right. Well, we thank you, our audience, for being here. And as I said,
thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. We will send out this recording, and we will get it posted to our YouTube channel in the near future once we've got it properly subtitled. Thank you so much, Kate, for your time. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Everyone, go enjoy the library.
Yes, please. We'd love to see you here. And don't forget, we deliver too, so we can bring the library to you. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.